To me, it's just so interesting that they're able to convince people without saying that it's coming from God. That's something that in my world, it's always been convincing because God says so. So how are they convincing people?
This whole thing about you can be anything else and be a Scientologist, at first it seems very inclusive and wow, that's amazing and non-threatening. And you go, yeah, but it's literally a deception. Now, here's how they slide in that deception in the beginning. They'll go, look, one of the fundamental beliefs of Scientology is that you can divide life up into like 8 different urges towards survival. And they call these the 8 dynamics. And then they say the 8th dynamic is the God dynamic or the infinity dynamic. And they go, and Scientology doesn't get into that. We deal with dynamics 1 through 7. And by doing enough Scientology, you will come to your own understanding of the nature and the truth of the 8th dynamic. Now, again, sounds great, sounds non-threatening, sounds inclusive, but what it really means is we don't believe in a God, but we're not going to tell you that. But eventually you're supposed to come to the understanding that you are basically a God. There is no God. We are all gods. It's like the ultimate self-help is that you're a God, and with enough Scientology, you can regain all your native powers.
Hey everyone, welcome back. My name is Sam.
And I'm Melissa.
I was raised in a family with 4 moms and 35 kids. We were members of the FLDS Church, which is a polygamous group run by their prophet Warren Jeffs, who is now serving a life sentence in prison.
I was raised mainstream LDS in Utah. Sam and I have been married for 10 years and have 2 awesome kiddos.
Yes, we do. And today we are very, very excited to welcome Aaron from Growing Up in Scientology. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Man, we had so many people, like hundreds of comments that were like, please get Aaron on, because we just barely started scratching the surface of the Scientology thing. And the very first episode, we're like, okay, we're gonna have to deep dive. I'm kind of a rabbit hole person to begin with, but I was like, we need to have a person that can just like ask a million questions and compare.
What's been very interesting is we've watched a little bit of Scientology and heard rumors about it. And it's been very interesting because it's so different from the way we were raised.
Mm-hmm.
But yet the comparisons are so fascinating to us. There's so many comparisons. And so that's one of the reasons, along with sharing some of your stories, to compare to the way we were raised in Scientology.
Yeah, I'm really excited that you guys messaged me because I've been wanting to do a video with you guys for a long time as well. It is always so fascinating to talk to former members of other religions and high control groups. And, it's funny, as controversial as it is to a current Scientologist to think that Scientology is a high control group, it seems to be just as controversial. Like the gap between how current Mormons and ex-Mormons feel about the group, current Jehovah's Witnesses, former Jehovah's Witnesses feel about the group. And, not to get too far off into the weeds too early on here, but for a current Scientologist, they can watch a documentary about some other cult. Like, let's say it was NXIVM or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Whereas they would never, ever be allowed to watch something about their own group. But if they're allowed to watch things about other groups, because Scientology's like, oh yeah, everything else is a cult, Scientology's not. So they can watch content about the other groups. And sometimes that is the easiest way for them to start questioning, like, our group seems a lot like that group.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I wondered if that was ever part of your guys' experience coming out of your own groups. Were you allowed to watch content about other groups, whether it was videos or documentaries or movies or anything like that?
Oh, 100%. It's always easier to look at somebody else and say, wow, look at how crazy they are. Or this is, especially within Mormonism, because there's the belief that we're the one and only truth growing up in that. It's very easy to be able to say, like, this is why, look how crazy that is. That's why we have the truth. We're the one and only truth, right? But one thing that we try to do a lot on our channel is show that there's just a lot more in common. Sometimes the terminology is different, right? Like I was shook when I heard the word $1 billion contract. I still can't get over it. It's been like a week.
Billion
I'm like,
year.
billion year, billion year. Yeah, $1 billion. We might get to that later, but $1 billion year contract. And I was like, that's so freaking long. Like, I can't believe, I guess that's not as long as eternity. Right? So here I am. I'm like, I think eternity sounds so nice and wonderful. And like at 8 years old, I'm baptized and I'm making this covenant for eternity. but that sounds like pleasant because that's what I'm used to. But a billion years sounds unfathomable. I can't believe someone would sign something like, so sometimes it's the terminology, and sometimes we just need to take a step back and be like, okay, we are more similar than we are different in a lot of these groups. And I know that can help people. I saw multiple comments in our comment section talk about starting to look into Scientology is what, led them out of the Mormon church or out of evangelical churches, or, I think, like you said, it helps open up people's minds to, I can look at their stuff and see how crazy it is. And sometimes drawing those comparisons help you internalize and look at your own situation.
Yeah. We've had someone reach out to us and say, because of someone you had on your channel that had nothing to do with the religion I'm currently in, but something they said made me realize that I am in a cult. And so I'm going to get out of this, right? So that kind of thing, seeing the comparisons and how similar, like you said, Aaron, really help open people's eyes in some cases. So, but kind of getting to well, we kind of already talked about it, the contract. That is something that is done early on within Scientology. Is that correct? And did you sign one of those?
Yes, I did sign one of those. I think the question itself sort of makes an assumption that I want to correct but explain.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
So in Scientology, there's roughly speaking 3 different levels of involvement, and signing the billion-year contract, that's like the highest, most dedicated level of involvement. That's committing your entire life, not just to believing in Scientology, but to working for Scientology. And so the group of people who sign the billion-year contracts in Scientology, they're called the C organization, members of the C organization.
Okay.
And all of Scientology's international management, middle management, continental management, and the Scientology organizations that deliver the confidential levels, all of those entities are staffed by members of the C organization. So they sign the billion-year contracts, but what that really means in putting it into application is they work 365 days a year, 18 hours a day for Scientology. They live in Scientology provided apartment housing, like dormitory style housing. They wear uniforms. It used to look like straight up Navy uniforms. These days, they tend to look more like hotel workers. They can only have relationships with other Sea Org members. They do not own property. They do not have jobs outside of Scientology. They do not have lives outside of Scientology. They do not control their own schedule. They do not, you don't have weekends off. It's 365 days a year. And that's like, those are the people who will wear uniforms and sometimes Navy looking uniforms. That's the Sea organization. And I was a Sea Org member.
So, question with that. So, I think maybe we misunderstood a little bit
did.
because we had watched a segment where I believe it was Jenna Miscavige. Yes, where she had signed that at the age of 7.
Yes, you're totally correct. You're totally correct. By the way, Jen is my girlfriend.
Oh, wow.
Okay. So, yeah, so I think maybe we thought that it was more of a membership thing. So that is more like becoming the equivalent of like a nun or a monk, right? Where you're dedicating everything. So it's not membership. So if that's the Sea Org, what is your like main entrance into membership? If I was to walk into a Scientologist, do they call them churches? What do they got? Buildings?
They call them, well, if they're talking to the press or the courts, they call them churches, but internally they just call them organizations.
Okay. So if I was to walk up to an org and then I walked in and said, I want to know what this is about, what would be like the first step in becoming a Scientologist?
So you would be called a public at that moment. You're a public Scientologist, and a public is someone who pays to do Scientology. They do not work for Scientology. They pay to do courses and to get auditing. And auditing is what they call their religious, spiritual counseling, whatever. Okay, but what it looks like is you're doing entry-level basic courses that cost $50 or $100. It's like how to have better relationships, how to have a successful marriage, how to start a successful relationship, how to be more efficient at work, how to succeed through communication. At the entry level, Scientology doesn't feel anything like a religion. You might even argue it doesn't even feel like a cult. It feels like a self-help improvement center. And to be honest, that's how Scientology prefers to market itself, is as self-help, self-improvement. And it's not about salvation. It's not about They don't use any terms that you would normally associate with religion.
Okay. So if you're going and let's say you're a member of another religion, right? And you go and you walk into Scientology, are you allowed to be a member of like a
Yep.
theological religion, right? Because there's no deity in Scientology.
Totally
Is that
correct.
correct?
So
Okay.
totally correct. But this is also a place where Scientology is deceptive. Like one of the things that's consistent about Scientology from the bottom to the top is lying about what they actually believe.
Okay.
And the deception. To me, that's what makes it's one of the main things that makes Scientology so completely different than most or all of the world's mainstream religions. Is like Christianity is not trying to hide from you what they believe. And, different branches of Christianity might have different versions of their belief, but they're not hiding it from you. They're not lying to you about it. And there's no secret materials. Now, maybe in Mormonism,
I was going to say, I'm
jump
like,
in. There's some secret material, right? But
yeah.
Scientology is dishonest about what they believe at every step of the way. And here's what I mean. So technically speaking, at the introductory levels, you can be a part of any other religion. You can believe in any God, any prophet, whatever.
Okay.
Eventually, that's not true. And there's no one hard line where that change occurs. It just depends on how deep you get into the culture. And so they will specifically lie to you in the beginning and say, you can be a Christian and be a Scientologist. You can be a Muslim and be a Scientologist. You can be a practicing Jew and be a Scientologist. That is only true at the introductory levels. It is 100% not true as you go higher. And one of the reasons that's not true is Scientology simply doesn't believe in a supreme being. And in order to truly believe everything L. Ron Hubbard says, which is what is expected of you as a Scientologist, especially as you move higher, get more and more experience. If you were to continue to believe in a supreme being or a prophet, whether it's Jesus or whether it's Joseph Smith or whether it's Muhammad, eventually you're going to get to a level in Scientology where your continued belief in those other things indicates a lack of understanding and belief in Scientology, and you will not be allowed to progress past a certain level until that is remedied.
Gotcha. Okay. So at some point, there's going to be a conflict of interest. If you get to a certain point, you're going to be like, these two things can't go together. And so I'm going to have to pick one way or the other. But before you'd get there, you'd probably be at such a deep level into Scientology that I can imagine that would be an extremely difficult decision to make. Like you're knee deep in one or the other, and to be in both isn't going to mesh well.
It makes sense that they're easing into it slowly. Like, hey, everyone's welcome. You don't have to do anything. Just come and take advantage of this that we're offering. It's so beautiful, so
He's using
wonderful.
his missionary voice. Did you notice that?
I didn't even notice.
You did.
Here I go. See, I've been deep into this stuff. So, but it's welcome. You don't have to give up anything. And then all of a sudden, as you believe and you start proving that you believe, then little by little things are added to it. And eventually you're thinking, oh, I believe nothing that I used to believe. And to me, it's just so interesting that they're able to convince people without saying that it's coming from God. That's something that in my world, it's always been convincing because God says so. So how are they convincing people?
It's a damn good question. So this whole thing about you can be anything else and be a Scientologist, at first it seems very inclusive and wow, that's amazing and non-threatening. And you go, yeah, but it's literally a deception. It's literally a deception. Now, here's how they slide in that deception in the beginning. And then if this doesn't actually precisely answer your question, I'll then answer the question. They'll go, look, one of the fundamental beliefs of Scientology is that you can divide life up into like 8 different urges towards survival. And they call these the 8 dynamics. And the first dynamic is yourself as an individual. The second dynamic is your family. The third dynamic is any group that you're a part of other than your family. And that's like an unlimited. That's the third dynamic. The fourth dynamic is all humankind. The fifth dynamic is all non-human life. The sixth dynamic is like the physical universe that you can see, smell, touch, and measure. The seventh dynamic is individual spirituality, or even collective, individual spirituality, or even collective spirituality, but as individual beings. And then they say the eighth dynamic is the God dynamic, or the infinity dynamic. And they go, and Scientology doesn't get into that. We deal with dynamics 1 through 7. And by doing enough Scientology, you will come to your own understanding of the nature and the truth of the 8th dynamic. Now, again, sounds great, sounds non-threatening, sounds inclusive, but what it really means is we don't believe in a God, but we're not going to tell you that. But eventually you're supposed to come to the understanding that you are basically a God. There is no God. We are all gods. God isn't a thing. It's a concept. It's an idea. And whatever powers or causality you would normally assign to God, that's actually you. And it's like the ultimate self-help is that you're a God, and with enough Scientology, you can regain all your native powers.
Okay, so I don't know how familiar you are with Mormonism in general, but the idea, the whole purpose of the LDS Church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, is to go through and make the covenants that are going to take you to the celestial kingdom so you can become like God.
Like God, yeah.
And you, even without getting too much into what's in the temple, like you are promised that you would be gods and goddesses, right? So yeah, it's interesting. So I'm like, the idea that there's this certain path, and if you go through here, you're going to be able to become like God. And when Mormons say that like you're the children of God, they mean literal children, that God and a heavenly mother actually created us as spirits that got bodies in this life, and that our purpose is to become like him in every way, including becoming a God. And that he also went through the same trials, and that we're just one of many, which is a huge reason why, and I didn't know this until, after leaving Mormonism, that I realized that that's why Christians really don't like Mormons a lot, like mainstream Christianity, because the idea that anybody could become a god is blasphemous, right? And so, yeah, but the idea that there's this path specifically meant to having you become a god because that's like your eternal purpose and that's what you're meant on this earth is very similar to Mormonism.
So, but this, I still have a big question about what you just said there, Aaron. You answered my question, but it led to another question. And that is, so are you promised an afterlife, or are they saying you will become a god, like a god in this life?
I love it. Good question. Because I was going to ask you a similar related question.
Okay.
So the Scientology belief about the nature of life and existence and the universe is kind of a combination between Star Wars and The Matrix.
Oh.
Okay. We saw like what we thought was a spoof video. And then they were like, that wasn't a spoof video. That was really Ron Hubbard talking. And I was like, I thought someone was making fun of them. And they were like, no, that's really it. I'm like, that's crazy. Star Wars though.
And I'll explain how this information will then lead to a direct answer to your question. So Scientologists believe there is life everywhere in the universe, intelligent life, all pretty much every solar system, every galaxy, everything. So that's what I mean when I say Star Wars. Star Wars, every planet they go to, there's some life or some civilization or some creatures or some monsters or whatever. Now let's bring in the Matrix. So in the Matrix, you're living in this contrived reality and you're really a slave. You're being, the energy of your body's being harvested for heat battery energy or whatever. But you as a physical being are enslaved. So Scientology believes in life everywhere in the universe, and that the beings that are in the bodies here on Earth are actually here because they were sent here because Earth is a prison planet. And that it's not just an afterlife. So in Scientology, there's no afterlife in the way the mainstream religions would describe afterlife, of like a heaven or a hell, like a spiritual plane other than the earthly plane or something like this, right? They believe that we literally just live lifetime after lifetime after lifetime after lifetime in these bodies here on Earth, and our memories just get wiped between lifetimes, because being on this planet and being in these bodies and having no memory or awareness that is what is happening to us is because this is a prison planet. And it's almost like the best way to keep someone in a prison is for them not to realize they're in a prison, which goes back to the Matrix analogy. None of those people who are plugged into the Matrix know they're plugged into the Matrix. They think the digital experience they're living is reality. Scientology believes that's very much what life on Earth is. That, every time we die, Scientologists call it dropping the body. You drop the body, you as a being, you're sort of pre-programmed to report into what they call, and I am not kidding about any of this, okay?
Wow.
the Between Lives implant station that is run by the evil alien psychiatrists. And it's a physical location, and there's more than one of them. Depending on which Scientologist you're talking to, it might be on the far side of the moon, it might be on Mars, it might be on Venus. You're pre-programmed to just like instantly teleport there because, spiritual beings have no inherent position in space or time. You can sort of go wherever you want. It's like spiritual teleportation, right?
Yeah.
You go to the Between Lives implant station, your memory gets wiped, you get beamed back down to a baby body in the local maternity ward at the hospital, and you just live a brand new lifetime.
Wow.
And your memory gets wiped in the Between Lives implant stations. And one of the main things Scientologists are trying to accomplish by going up the levels in Scientology is to have enough spiritual awareness and ability to consciously skip the Between Lives implant station so that when you come back next lifetime, you have full and total recall of your previous life, including all the Scientology that you did.
Okay, but for what purpose?
That's what I was just going to ask. I was like, what's the purpose?
So just because you know that you're in a prison now, are you able to escape?
Excellent question. So L. Ron Hubbard specifically says, and this gets a little, don't think about it too deeply because you might realize you're in a cult, but he says, once you get up to Scientology's higher levels, sure, you could go off and explore the universe next lifetime, but you wouldn't want the fate of all your fellow human beings on your conscience, would you? So the only dignified thing to do is to come back as a fully aware, reincarnated Scientologist and put your shoulder to the wheel, helping to get everyone else on Earth, or at least half of them, into Scientology and up the levels so we can all leave this planet at the same time, go off to Target 2. He didn't say what Target 2 was, but it's just another planet. Go off to Target 2 and clear that planet as well. Now, the word clear here is a verb, but the state of clear is a level in Scientology that you achieve where it's supposed to be a significant moment in your progress up Scientology's levels, a particular level of awareness that you've achieved. And so Scientology has this phrase called clearing the planet. And clearing the planet doesn't mean getting rid of everybody off the planet. It means getting everyone on the planet up to Scientology's state of clear.
Gotcha.
Okay. See, and again, it's, I'm sure you probably get this all the time where like sometimes I'll ramble about stuff and just feel like it's so normal because like you can spout all this stuff and I'm like, oh my gosh, how do you even keep track of this? And then sometimes I'll say stuff and I'm like, well, when you're raised in it, right, you just know what you know because you've been taught your entire life that that's the truth. And so you know all the things. But at the same time, I'm trying to take a step back. Like every step that you're saying, I'm like, okay, can I take a step back and think of how I was raised? And I was thinking about spirit prison. Right? When you're talking about this going into that other place, right? Now, we don't believe in reincarnation in that sense, but every single spirit within Mormonism has to be baptized and make the covenants that you make in the temple. Every single person, which is why they do baptisms for the dead. So rather than them being reincarnated and brought back to this earth, and then you're trying to like teach everyone here, we believe in two things. There's missionaries all over the world to try to give everyone their chance here on earth. But then when people die, if they haven't had those ordinances done in the temple, they go to spirit prison instead of spirit paradise while we wait for the second coming of Jesus Christ. Okay. And while they're sitting in prison, the only way, even if they could be Mother Teresa, okay, could be sitting in prison because she did not have the opportunity to get baptized into the Mormon church. So she's sitting there in prison until somebody is baptized for the dead for her in a temple. That's the only opportunity for them to accept those ordinances and get from prison to paradise. And the goal is that after Jesus Christ comes the second time, there's going to be the millennium. There's going to be 1,000 years where the whole goal is just missionary work to get everybody to perform those ordinances, those temple ordinances, so that everybody can return back to God in the celestial kingdom. Wow. So I know on like surface level, those sound different, but at the same time, the goal is the same. The goal is that every single soul on this earth be able to reach some type of, whether you're going to call it another planet, would you call it Sector 2 or?
Target 2.
Target 2. Okay. Whether you're trying to get to Target 2 or whether you're trying to get to the celestial kingdom, right? This place that they believe the world, isn't the world going to turn into the celestial kingdom?
This will become a celestial
after the
state,
millennium. Yes. This earth is actually going to become the celestial kingdom. But yeah, so it's like still this idea of there's going to be this other place, but the whole goal is that the whole world becomes, and that's why Mormons are so they want to do so much missionary work, because that is the whole
Wow.
goal. So we might not
Wow.
calling it clearing the world, but it is trying to save all the people on this planet is so important.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So does Mormonism, mainstream Mormonism, consider itself to be a branch of or the true Christianity?
100%.
Yes.
Yes. So they still believe that Jesus Christ is their savior. So all of this is only possible through him, but it is the one and only truth. So we're taught that there was a great apostasy. And so all the other Christian churches, they all have partial truths. And that's why people will be like, we still believe you can be a really good person and be a Catholic, or you can be a Protestant or whatever. Like all these people, because they all have pieces of the truth within Christianity, but that Mormonism is the only church that has the fullness of
Right.
the
It was
truth.
restored
Yeah.
through the prophet Joseph
Wow.
Smith. That God came to
Wow.
Joseph Smith and restored all of the truthfulness of the gospel to
Directly.
give this last dispensation a chance to actually return and be like God. So, yeah, it's interesting how in recent, like within the last couple hundred years, there's been a lot of these religions popping up with similar stories, but different terminologies used to convince everyone that they have the truth and that everyone needs to follow this certain path.
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
So
very, very interesting.
how do Mormons view Jehovah's Witnesses?
They are just another Christian church that just, doesn't have the full truth. So there's goodness there. They have some of the truth. Obviously, them being Christian is very important, right? Because then they're like at least kind of on the right track.
Yep.
Basically, like within Mormonism, if anybody's already Christian, they're like an easier convert. If they can say like, "Oh, do you believe in God?" Yes, and you believe in Jesus Christ as your savior, like you're already most of the way. We can get you from here to here. Like that's easy. If they're
Yeah.
starting with like a atheist, they're like, "Whew, we got a long ways to go." It's a lot more work to get
Wow.
them on the proper path.
And so how would you have viewed Scientologists?
I'd say I never really viewed it as a church, like even though we heard that it was a church, because from what I knew, and I knew even still now, as you can tell by my very basic questions to you, I know very, very little about it.
Yeah.
But just in general, I just heard that it was called a church, but since there wasn't a lot of like theological, like there wasn't a deity and they're not Christian, it was just kind of an outskirt group. I just kind of viewed it as a group. And I had heard that they did self-help stuff. And you always hear about Tom Cruise, John Travolta. So, there's some people. And I think it always just kind of gets left as like, it's this crazy group. They believe some crazy stuff. But I remember like, I think it was back in high school once, someone was like, Scientologists are crazy because they believe that there's like an alien out there that, sent all these people to Earth. And I remember even at that time, and I was like very much in the Mormon church, and I was like, how is that much different than the idea that like God sent us here and that we're all his physical
It's
children?
an alien versus God.
Alien versus God.
Big
So I
difference.
was able to like see that comparison easily, but there were other people around me that were Mormon that, like you said at the very beginning, that differentiation was too much for them. They couldn't see the comparison. They couldn't see that it was similar.
Right.
It was just like, they're crazy. They believe in some alien. We're the truth. We believe in the one and only true God.
Right. Well, when they say you can be anything and be a Scientologist, that would include being a Mormon. And one of the most obvious ways for me that someone outside of Scientology can see there is no way to believe in both is, and this is why I'll ask you directly on how it compares to the Mormon belief. Scientology believes in alien life everywhere, and that life is not unique to Earth. It didn't start on Earth. It's not even Earth isn't even particularly important as a source of life. There's nothing special about Earth. It sure as hell wasn't created by a god. And so if you were a Mormon and a Scientologist was telling you, oh yeah, you can be a Mormon and be a Scientologist, but you knew that Scientologists believed in coming back lifetime after lifetime after lifetime after lifetime on Earth in physical bodies, and they believed in aliens everywhere, how would you respond to the assertion that you can be a Mormon and a Scientologist?
Yeah, no, because that goes directly against what Mormons believe.
The reincarnation part would be like, I think the biggest stop there would be like, there's no
more than the aliens.
Well, because again, if you're willing to change the word alien into humans, Mormons totally believe that there's planets everywhere, because when you become a god yourself within Mormon theology, your job is to become a god and to populate your own planet.
Yep.
And
Oh.
so there are planets. I mean, all of Mormonism believes that there are tons of planets out there, because you're going to be a god of your own with your own planet someday. And the mainstream, and I got to clarify two things. I always feel like I have to say this, and I don't know if I really do, but when I say Mormonism, the reason I say that too, like people in the members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints right now don't like being called Mormons. Their current prophet says not to. I still will use that term because I was told that that was a positive term when I was growing up. But also there's a lot of fundamentalist groups. So Mormonism as a whole, meaning like what Joseph Smith restored, is what I'm referring to, more than just the mainstream church that you hear about all the time. Like there's a lot more groups.
Why do current Mormons feel that the word Mormon is like, why is that not the word to use anymore? Is it because people will include the FLDS in that whole thing?
Nope. It's just because the current prophet came out and said that we shouldn't be using nicknames, that they need to use the full name of the church, and they need to make sure to include the word Jesus Christ so people know that they're Christians.
Yeah.
Wow. Where did the word Mormon even come from then?
So
the Book of Mormon.
Yeah.
So there's a book that is scripture within the Mormon church that is supposed to go hand in hand with the Bible, but of equal importance, if not more, because they say that it was translated by God perfectly. There are no mistranslations in it.
Yeah.
And but it's a scripture they use that's called the Book of Mormon because it was compiled by a prophet, a Mormon prophet called Mormon.
Named Mormon, yeah.
Wait, his name was Mormon?
Yes,
his name was Mormon.
So, then, but then where did the adjective even come from? You said a Mormon prophet. Why did the group start being called after that guy's name?
I think the Book of Mormon is one of the things that really sets the Mormon church apart from other
because you
churches.
believe in the Bible as well, and then the Book of Mormon is a second set of scriptures. And so because that differentiates from Christianity of people following just the Bible, we believe, see, I still say we, they believe in the Bible and the Book of Mormon.
Yeah.
And so people were like, oh, you're following this other book, this Mormon book, you guys are Mormon.
So I thought Joseph Smith created the Book of Mormonism with his golden tablets and the translations and everything.
Yep.
So where did the other Mormon dude named Mormon come from?
Oh, he's a prophet within the Book of Mormon. So just like there's prophets in the Bible, there was a guy named Mormon that was a prophet in the ancient times, and he was a prophet within the Book of Mormon, and that's why the book is named after him, because he was a prophet.
It would be like calling the Bible the Book of Peter, for example.
Yeah,
because you know what I mean? Like it's a prophet within. But the reason it was called the Book of Mormon is because Mormon, he took all of the writings from other prophets and put it together in one book, as the story goes. And that's what was introduced to Joseph Smith on the golden tablets, is all of those compiled scriptures.
Mormon had gathered them all at the end of the book. There's a huge war, and all the righteous people are being slaughtered. And he is the one who buries up all the records of all of the prophets. And so he's like the last one to grab everything. He writes down what's happening at the end of the destruction, and it buries it. And then Joseph Smith is the one who finds it later and translates it.
When Joseph Smith was alive, did he use the term Mormons?
I don't know if he would use it, but it very quickly became the nickname that was the nickname forever. And then like me growing up in the 90s, we were taught you're supposed to be proud to be a Mormon. I don't know if you ever saw there was like a big I am a Mormon campaign. Like in the early 2000s, they had like Times Square billboards, I'm a Mormon.
Wow, Scientology copied you guys. There's an I am a Scientologist campaign.
No way. Right now?
Oh, wow.
Yes. And for the last 10 or 15 years.
Okay, yeah, no, they totally copied us. We even had like a movie where like to show that Mormons were just regular people too. And so they'd be like, hashtag I'm a Mormon. And then when that prophet died, Thomas S. Monson died, and the new prophet, Russell M. Nelson, took over. How many years has it been?
It's been a few
like 10 years.
Has it been 10?
It's been close to that.
Wow.
Yeah, like I think all of our marriage. Yeah, so when he took over, he had never really liked that people use that term. And so when he became prophet, he announced that saying the word, calling us Mormons was a win for Satan because it's keeping Jesus Christ's name out of it and keeping a nickname. And the members were like, okay. So now they call themselves either the full name, which is a mouthful. I'm like, no one wants to call you a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Or you can be called LDS, a Latter-day Saint.
or just a member of the church.
Or a member of the church.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. I have to tell you this little 30-second story. So in Scientology, there's a policy where L. Ron Hubbard basically says, if you're in a bind and you don't know what to do, the best thing is just to ask yourself, what would Ron do? And I was never really exposed to much Christianity growing up. I mean, my mom had been raised in a Christian family. But when I first was sort of exposed a little more to the real world and I saw stickers of what would Jesus do, I was like, oh, look, they stole our shit.
Yeah. Because Jesus came after Ron, right?
I was like, I can't believe they stole our shit. It didn't occur to me like, no, we stole their shit. Ron stole
their stuff. Bring up a very good point. Very good point. And anyone that has been in one of these high demand groups can totally relate to this. But me coming from the FLDS church, they try to keep the rest of the outside world kind of away and out of view, and just focus on the teachings of the FLDS church, the importance of this one small church. There were 10,000 of us at its height, about that. Maybe got up to closer to 15,000 at one point. But we assumed that we were the most important people, the most special people on this earth, and that everyone else was going to be trying to fight against us, this little small group, because we had the one truth, and Satan was going to control the world and try to take us down. And so we assumed that anything outside there, like you just mentioned, would be trying to make fun of us or trying to copy us, or and it was all about the one belief that we had. It was my whole world.
No, y'all are copying the mainstreams.
Yeah.
We're the OG for all that stuff, and you guys are definitely
And then I realized once I left that the majority of the world have no idea who we are or really care much about what we believe. But when you're raised in it, you just assume that everyone is looking at you and wanting to be more like you because you have the one truth, the one amazing truth in this world, right?
Yeah.
So, one thing, we can jump around a lot here and reel me back in if if you need to. So I believe at least you guys have a story about Joseph Smith of how he came to, be the chosen one or the enlightened one or the prophet or whatever the right word would be. In Scientology, L. Ron Hubbard doesn't even bother to make some claim for why he's so special.
Really? So there's no origin story to how, because I was going to ask that, like how Scientology, I don't know if came to be is the right word, but like obviously we know that he was a science fiction writer, right? And so it's very easy from the outside to be like, he's a science fiction writer and then he makes up the science fiction church. But from the inside, I always felt like there's got to be more to like the story they gave you as to how he went that way and how he founded the church. What's their foundation story?
There's a few different answers, a few different like sort of answers or pieces of information about this, and I'll share them all. But there's no like one provided and accepted answer to this question. There's certainly not one overarching, profound answer to this question. Okay. So, in fact, in the most important policy letter that exists in Scientology, it's called "Keeping Scientology Working," is the name of the policy letter. It's in the beginning of every Scientology course. He literally says, "We will not speculate as to how I came to rise above the bank." Now, the bank is a word for the reactive mind, and getting rid of the reactive mind is what in Scientology means you've achieved the state of clear. The reactive mind is what L. Ron Hubbard first wrote about in the book Dianetics, which was the first book that ever had anything to do with Dianetics or Scientology. And basically getting rid of the reactive mind is, for most of your time in Scientology, supposed to be the biggest thing you're trying to accomplish to achieve your native spiritual potential. And he literally says in this policy, "We will not speculate as to basically how I became the first person ever to overcome the trap of the reactive mind and to figure out how to resolve it and get rid of it and to provide a technique for others to be able to follow. We won't even speculate." And I'm like, I think that's something we should be speculating about. Okay. And I remember when I was about, 13, 14 years old, doing my full-time Scientology training here in Clearwater, Florida, where I live now, by the way. I remember thinking to myself, it didn't bother. I was like, it just occurred to me that if someone were to ask me, why do we believe that everything L. Ron Hubbard said was the most true thing ever said about whatever he was talking about? Like, it occurred to me, I didn't know what the answer to that question would be. And I wasn't troubled by the fact that I didn't know. I was troubled by the fact that if someone asked me, I wouldn't be able to answer it and I would feel silly. Isn't that interesting distinction? I wasn't like, uh-oh, this is a crisis of faith. I was like, no, I just need to know how to answer the question without looking like an idiot, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I found out that L. Ron Hubbard later on wrote a whole book where he claims he is the reincarnation of Buddha.
Oh.
And I was like, jackpot, everybody loves Buddha. That's a great answer.
Okay.
And he actually says that as Buddha, he created what he thought was a permanent state of enlightenment called Bodhi. And after he achieved that, he, dropped the body as Buddha and I guess went off to explore the universe for a while, and then was very embarrassed to have learned that Bodhi was only a temporary state. And he needed to come back and do some solid research and discovery to formulate techniques to bring about a permanent state of Bodhi. And in pursuit of that, he developed Dianetics and Scientology. And Scientology's state of clear is basically a permanent state of whatever Bodhi is to Buddhists. And I was like, that's a pretty good answer.
Yeah.
Wow.
No,
I'll tell you what, Scientology will never publicly say that L. Ron Hubbard claimed that.
Oh, okay.
Interesting.
That's good to know then.
So they don't tell their members
even that is not something they run around being like, now look, this is why L. Ron Hubbard is so special. No, that's kind of what Scientologists whisper to each other.
Okay.
Wow. So the whole don't speculate is, hey, it's none of your business. Just try to be as cool as me, but I'm not going to tell you exactly how I did it.
Literally. He says, I am not a god. Literally, I mean, L. Ron Hubbard did not believe in a supreme being. It's not taught in Scientology. It's like, so he doesn't claim to be anything special. And actually, Scientology is all about just becoming more and more like Ron. Like, he did it. He's not a god. He's not special. He achieved the state of spiritual awareness and enlightenment and power. And he laid out the techniques of Dianetics and Scientology so that you can achieve the exact same thing. And all it has to do with is all of us becoming, getting back to the state that we originally were at when we all created ourselves in the universe, which is just literal gods who are senior to even the physical universe. Like, even this universe that we exist in, a Scientologist would tell you, we just created this. Like, we created the universe, and we could destroy this universe and create another one, right?
Yeah.
Again, completely incompatible with any concept of a religion, a single supreme being. Yes.
Right.
Do you think that Ron Hubbard, because he passed away a long time ago, right? He hasn't been around for a while.
1986.
Okay. Do you think that he ever thought Scientology would become what it is? Like, do you think that was his master plan? Or do you think he was just trying to get money for himself at the time and was like, look what I did, and you guys should follow this? Maybe he was sincerely trying to help some people. Do you think it was meant to be diabolical and ever cause harm? Or do you think it was always meant for positivity?
I believe L. Ron Hubbard believed he was doing good work.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I believe L. Ron Hubbard is the type of guy who could not tell you a real story about something that really happened without lying his ass off about it. Like, I believe he couldn't even tell you a fantastic story without trying to make it more fantastic. I believe L. Ron Hubbard thought Dianetics was basically an effective poor man's psychotherapy. And I believe he was sincere when he offered it to the psychiatric profession, the AMA and the APA, and thought that he would be welcomed with open arms and thanked as the savior of mankind post World War II, and all the soldiers are having mental problems and everything. I thought he thought this was great, and he wrote a book about it, and his book had a technique that many people found effective, but the book was also laden with just pseudoscience, mumbo jumbo nonsense. And I don't think he started out with any grand vision of where it would end up. I think he honestly bought into his own bullshit. I believe he thought he was doing good stuff, but he was just a pathological liar as well. Just a pathological liar. And then as he got older and older, he also just literally just became more and more insane.
Okay.
And I think he thought he was helping people. I think he without question eventually believed all of his own bullshit.
Okay. Now, when he passed away, since you're saying he didn't believe that he was a god, he didn't believe that he was like a prophet or a messiah or anything like that, where you see in these other groups. So, how did the transfer of power go from him to the next person in Scientology? Can you kind of give us like a little, like for us, there's prophet lineage, right? Like Joseph Smith saw God the Father, Jesus Christ, and bestowed to him the priesthood or power of God on earth. And we can trace down like mainstream Mormonism. Heck, I can still name them all. Every prophet down to the current prophet. And for him, he can say these prophets, and then it broke off, and now it's these prophets.
Mm-hmm.
So what does that look like in Scientology?
Okay, David Miscavige is the guy that currently runs Scientology. And in a manner of speaking, he's the only person who has run Scientology really since L. Ron Hubbard died. And yet he was not selected by L. Ron Hubbard to run Scientology.
Oh.
L. Ron Hubbard did not have a clearly outlined succession plan. And for the last 6 years of L. Ron Hubbard's life, he was off in seclusion. Intentionally, his whereabouts was unknown to anyone in Scientology other than the 2 or 3 or 4 people who knew where he was because they were there with him.
Okay.
And the 2 high-level Scientology Sea Org members who were with him at that time, two of maybe 3, 4, or 5, was a couple named Pat Broker and Annie Broker. And they were basically L. Ron Hubbard's caretakers for the last 6 years of his life. And no one in Scientology knew where these people were, including David Miscavige. Now, David Miscavige was, just to put it as simply as possible, even though people could argue with the true truth of this at a detail level, David Miscavige was basically put in charge of handling every legal threat against L. Ron Hubbard that existed at that time so that L. Ron Hubbard could come out of hiding. At that time, David Miscavige was not actually in charge of running Scientology. There was a whole management structure in place that was running the day-to-day operations of Scientology and the international management level of Scientology. But because David Miscavige had this special assignment, basically being tasked with L. Ron Hubbard with basically the most important thing anybody could be tasked with, making it okay for L. Ron Hubbard to come back. He wielded an immense amount of authority, even though his job wasn't to run Scientology. Now, the way information would get from the operational side of Scientology over to L. Ron Hubbard is Pat Broker and David Miscavige would meet up at confidential secret locations. I mean, like it was total like 007 CIA spy stuff, right? Burner phones, burying cars, all this kind of stuff. So David Miscavige and Pat Broker, David Miscavige from the Scientology side, Pat Broker from the L. Ron Hubbard side, were basically the bottlenecks of all, or the gatekeepers of all information to and from L. Ron Hubbard. So that gave David Miscavige another sense of authority. He could feed false information to L. Ron Hubbard to make L. Ron Hubbard decide to get rid of people.
Oh, wow.
That's how David Miscavige got L. Ron Hubbard to turn against most of the people who had power other than David Miscavige on the Scientology operations side of things. Now, what happened is that when L. Ron Hubbard finally died, word on the street is that Pat Broker and Annie Broker were the ones who were basically deputized by L. Ron Hubbard to keep the ball rolling on the operations side, and not David Miscavige. Like I said, David Miscavige was not in charge of running Scientology. Now, we haven't yet spoken about Scientology's upper confidential levels, and we'll save that for later in this video. But just know that there's confidential levels in Scientology from 1 through 8. It's called the OT levels 1 through 8. L. Ron Hubbard claimed that what he was doing while he was in seclusion was creating OT 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15. Oh. When L. Ron Hubbard died, Pat Broker claimed to have possession of all of L. Ron Hubbard's unreleased upper OT level research. And he had it stored away at a secret location. That is how, for maybe a couple years after L. Ron Hubbard died, Pat Broker, using this leverage, retained essentially autonomy for himself at the highest echelon of Scientology. David Miscavige did not have complete control because Pat Broker, who had been one of L. Ron Hubbard's closest confidants for the last 6 years, claimed to be in possession of all the upper level confidential research that L. Ron Hubbard had done. Okay. David Miscavige called Pat Broker's bluff one time when Pat Broker was out of town. Okay. And David Miscavige, with a whole bunch of higher level Scientology executives, showed up to the ranch where Pat Broker was claiming to store all this information. They showed up with trucks, vans, shotguns, and firearms and said, our inside people in the government have warned us that this facility is about to be raided. And if we don't get everything in that building into these trucks right now, the government is going to have L. Ron Hubbard's upper level confidential research. Wow. And they basically stole everything Pat Broker had from L. Ron Hubbard and went through every scrap, every file, every paper, and found nothing about any upper level materials whatsoever. And that is how David Miscavige got rid of Pat Broker.
Why is it always on a ranch? Tell me, if you tell me it was in Texas, I'm going to lose it. Was it in Texas?
It was in California. It was in California.
Oh, okay.
I'm like, every bad thing happens on a ranch in Texas, like all the FLDS raids. And then we saw another thing from, I think it was Scientology, and they're talking about some other...
The shiny happy people, I believe, on that.
Oh, shiny happy people. Anyway, and we're like, why is it always in Texas on a ranch?
Yeah.
But that is wild.
To this day, David Miscavige still claims to have all of these upper unreleased OT levels locked away in the vault, at the secret vault, and that and he claims L. Ron Hubbard dictated that every Scientology organization in the world has to achieve certain expansion benchmarks before OT 9 and 10 can be released. And every freaking year, David Miscavige stands up there at an international event that gets broadcast to all Scientologists in the world and basically says, we're almost there, guys. Just work a little bit harder, donate a little bit more money. It's coming sooner than you think. And if we were to have a conversation about, well, what really does make Scientology different than some of these other cults or high control groups, I like to say, I believe that the Pope at least believes in heaven. David Miscavige knows there are no upper OT levels, and he is only one of a handful of upper level Sea Org members who knows that. And he lies his face off to every Scientologist in the world, and has for the last 40 years, or however long it's been. He knows that everything L. Ron Hubbard promised was not achieved, and that you will not achieve it. He knows that. And so it makes Scientology almost a unique scam. It's not just a high control group. It's not just an offshoot of this or a bastardization of that. Like, it's a scam. It's a lie. And Miscavige knows it.
Yeah. Wow. The fact that he knows. People always ask us a lot whether or not we believe that Warren Jeffs
actually believes,
whether he actually believes in everything, like, has he lost his mind? Like, where's the line of him just buying into his own vision? Kind of like what you're saying with Ron Hubbard, right? Where they kind of get to the point where they really do believe all the bull crap that they've been spewing for so long, because now there's almost no other option for them, and they get just so drawn into their own vision. So people ask us that all the time. But the idea of like if you were just a little better, that's like how he was.
Oh yeah. Well, it's so classic. It's just what these people use to convince their followers to keep giving, to keep following. And that is to say, hey, the end is near, or this big thing's about to happen. You got to stay faithful for a little bit longer, and you got to keep doing these things. That's so 101 classic Warren Jeffs. Every single almost every revelation he talks about, well, revelation in quotation marks here, he talks about the end, or this big thing that's going to happen that we have to be prepared for. So the fact that you brought that up here, that it's happening in a religious type of a group is I mean, I guess I shouldn't be surprised, but man, it's just so classic.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, early in Hubbard's writings, he spoke and wrote very, very negatively and derogatorily about religion in general, the subject of religion. He wasn't trying to claim Scientology was a religion. It's why they call it an applied philosophy. His early policy letters were very business oriented. They called their smaller groups franchises. These days, they're called missions, but it's the exact. They just decided to call it a mission instead of a franchise. And so, in the early days, Scientology didn't even try to pretend that they were a religion. And then it really was just for tax exempt purposes that they were like, okay, now we're going to call orgs churches. Now we're going to call auditors ministers. We're going to call auditing pastoral counseling. We're going to call policy letters scripture. We're going to call Sea Org members clergy. And as a Scientologist, it was all very cringe. We were like, oh God, do we have to do this? We don't even religion is like, oh, we don't want to be one of those people.
Yep.
That's what I wanted to ask you that too. Like, well, how does, earlier you had asked how we viewed, how like Mormonism viewed Scientologists. How did Scientologists view other religions or mainstream Christianity?
It was like, oh God. It was like, how embarrassing. Oh my God. How theedy weedy, how like high in the sky. Oh, there's a magic being and he created everything, and just be more like, it was like, oh God, I can't even. Like it wasn't even like, because Scientologists don't believe in anything really greater than just Scientology. It was like, oh God, they believe that bullshit story. Here's what, I'll give an even better answer. L. Ron Hubbard said that the world's major religions are that the seeds were basically planted by the evil alien psychiatrist that sent us here. They planted the seeds into our collective spiritual minds so that we, as a civilization of humans on this planet, would evolve these stories that would basically help keep the population controlled. Wow. And so that we would have thought, as a Christian believing in Jesus, as no different than a Muslim believing in Muhammad, is like, oh God, they buy into those stories. Like, oh my God, just wait till they get into Scientology and find the truth.
Right. Yep.
But it's interesting that Scientology's version of the truth, it's not like we were thinking we offer the unique salvation, because the type of salvation, but that's not even a word Scientologists use. Like, they don't even speak in those terms, like save, salvage. We really did think of it as more like, no, look, these are the techniques. You do them. You become more aware of your native abilities. It's almost like we were trapped into talking about it as if it was a religion. We didn't want to talk about it as if it was a religion. We wanted to talk about it as things you do. You don't have to believe anything. And yet it's funny, that's almost the way Scientologists brainwash themselves into thinking Scientology doesn't require belief. Boy, I'll tell you, as an ex-Scientologist trying to explain the things that Scientologists actually do believe, it's almost like, how did we ever convince ourselves this was not a belief system?
You don't realize how crazy something sounds until you step away and you're from the outside looking in. And I feel that way about the FLDS all the time. And when I was in it, it just made sense. It was all I knew. It made sense. Speaking of, were you raised in the Scientology religion or non-religion?
Yes. I was 4 years old when my mom got involved, and she got involved very deeply, very quickly. And I was 12 years old when me and my brother were taken out of school to start working full-time for Scientology. So like, I never went to high school. I never went to college. I mean, from the age of 12 to 26, I worked full-time for Scientology, first as a staff member and then as a Sea Org member.
Wow.
Okay, so do they not? So same with FLDS, but except for they would typically be on construction crews doing like manual labor type jobs. So rather than it being for the church in the sense of like clergy or staff member for the church, it was to
help build. I mean, in a way, it was helping the church, because we would also give tithing money, as we called it, to the church to help, support the kingdom of God, as they would say. So yeah, it was a lot of work at a young age, just like you mentioned here. And I never went to high school. I mean, I got my GED and went to college later on after I left, but in it was never a priority.
So if it's not a religious base, like, okay, we need to do this because this is what God wants, what is the motivation for a kid not to get an education?
It is as simple as this. L. Ron Hubbard would say, you as a spiritual being are about 67 or 76 trillion years old. You've been living lifetime after lifetime after lifetime after lifetime in a myriad of universes and galaxies and solar systems and planets. And the only reason you don't remember any of that is just some stupid crap that Scientology can fix for you. So he goes, you already know everything. You've been a king a million times. You've been a queen a million times. You've been a doctor. You've been a lawyer. You've been literally everything. You already have all the knowledge in you that it could even exist. The only thing you've never done before is Scientology. Scientology, he says, is the only thing in this entire universe that is new. And there's no reason for you to spend any time in school beyond what it takes for you to know how to read and write enough to study and understand L. Ron Hubbard's writings and lectures.
Wow.
And it's almost unheard of for a Scientologist to go to college. Now, it's not unheard of for college graduates to be recruited into Scientology. So there's
Mhm.
a lot of Scientologists who are college educated or are even doctors or chiropractors or dentists or whatever. But for a kid raised in Scientology to go to college is almost unheard of.
Dang.
Interesting. So obviously they're trying to recruit everyone, right? To convince
Yep.
everyone that Scientology is the correct way of believing and the only way to help you. And so we see out of all of the religions or these groups, Scientology seems to be known for having really famous people a part of it, like Tom Cruise, for example. And he's the biggest name that I know of anyway that's in it. Is that part of their plan, is recruiting these people like that are very well known?
It is part of their plan. It's a plan that also has completely failed for them over the last 20 years.
Mm.
So at this point, almost every celebrity who's a Scientologist that you could name has already been in Scientology for like 30 years or has already been born and raised in Scientology. So like Elizabeth Moss of The Handmaid's Tale, born and raised in Scientology.
Oh, okay.
Giovanni Ribisi of tons of movies, born and raised in Scientology. Even Lisa Marie Presley, before she died, she was a child when her mom got into Scientology. What are some other big examples? Tom Cruise, been in Scientology since 1986. Kirstie Alley, before she died, been in Scientology since the 80s. Beck, the singer Beck, born and raised in Scientology and has left. So yes, Scientology, even L. Ron Hubbard wrote a policy focusing on recruiting celebrities. It's interesting because to me, that is something that is just so common sense. It's just like having celebrity endorsements celebrities doing commercials for a product or a brand. It's just the exact same thing.
Yep.
And doesn't Christianity have its own versions of that, with people like Mel Gibson or whatever?
I mean, yeah, and especially within Mormonism, right? And I think we had said this on like one of our first videos where they brought up Tom Cruise, and I was like, I feel like there's only a couple religions that really like if that star is a specific like no one cares if so and so was a Catholic. It's like, oh, they're a Scientologist, they're a Mormon, they're a Jehovah's Witness.
There's
Sometimes
smaller groups.
maybe if they're like super devout Orthodox Jew, maybe you'd hear it, but like I feel like there's only like a handful out of thousands of religions that's a huge piece of, oh, they're an actor and they're this religion.
Mhm.
And you hear Scientology, you hear Mormonism all the time. And then especially when people are super successful, the LDS church definitely, Mitt Romney, oh, he was going to try to be president. So you hear that. And of course, the religion gets brought into it every single time. If they're a Mormon, it always gets brought up
Yeah.
publicly.
It's interesting. Tom Cruise being a Scientologist, of course, Scientologists believe, and I certainly believe this, that Tom Cruise was going to be the person to bring Scientology to worldwide acceptance. He was going to be the one to get everybody to go. If Tom Cruise says that Scientology is how Tom Cruise got to be Tom Cruise, then who wouldn't want to be Tom Cruise? And he really is like, I like using the Matrix analogy, like in the world of Scientology. I mean, you guys saw the movie The Matrix, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So you could call Morpheus was basically like the founder, the head of the entire unplug everyone from the Matrix movement. But then Neo was the one who was actually going to make it all possible.
Right.
And in Scientology, at this point, L. Ron Hubbard would have been Morpheus, but at this point, David Miscavige would be Morpheus. But Tom Cruise is definitely the Neo of Scientology.
Yeah.
And he achieved his final ultimate form as a super Scientologist back in 2005 during the War of the Worlds era and the Katie Holmes era, where all of a sudden this guy would not shut up about Scientology, and Scientologists thought that was the greatest thing ever.
Yeah.
It didn't turn out so well for Tom Cruise.
No,
The
it
guy
did
doesn't
not.
talk about Scientology anymore.
Yeah. No, and that's something I was going to ask. It doesn't seem like it's working that well. How many people would you say, this may be a hard question, do you have any idea
Easy.
how many people believe in Scientology?
Yeah. I have a video where I break this down very clearly, by sector, by level of organization, by type of involvement.
Oh, wow.
The most generous estimate you could possibly come up with currently is 35,000 Scientologists in the entire world. The true number of active Scientologists is probably closer to 20,000 or less.
Oh, wow.
I honestly thought it was way bigger than that.
Yeah, that's not very big.
Because when I heard that it was worldwide.
Well, it is worldwide. It's just that the organizations are so small. For the last 20 years, David Miscavige has been involved in a real estate strategy to buy giant brand new buildings for every existing Scientology organization. And the one thing Scientology does have more and more of is money. Even though they have less and less members, they're accumulating more and more money.
Right.
And it's nothing for them to take 10 or $15 million and shift it, from the cash reserves on the balance sheet to a real estate item on the balance sheet. So they buy these new giant big buildings and they put out a press release saying they've opened a new Scientology organization, but it's not a new organization. It's a big building for an existing small failing organization. Whereas before, that organization might have been small, but they also had low overhead. They might have been able to pay their staff a few bucks a week. Now you saddle them with a 50,000 square foot building. These guys can't pay their electric bills.
Yeah, we're looking at each other because we're both thinking the same thing. Are you going to say it or do you want me to say it?
It just, you see this where even if a lot of people are leaving or there's not as many people joining, but they're building all of these really big, beautiful buildings everywhere, you're going to assume that it is growing.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm referring, of course, to all the temples popping up for the
Mainstream
mainstream
church.
Mormon mainstream LDS church. But you hear that not very many people are attending some of these, but yet they're popping up everywhere.
Or they don't have enough workers. There's a lot of speculation right now, like in the ex-Mormon community, talking about like there's places where the missions aren't growing or missions are, they call them stakes. So there's like wards, which is like a congregation. Then there's a bunch of congregations that make a stake, and they're like stakes are closing down or minimizing, and then they'll announce a brand new temple. But the Mormon church now has more money than the Catholic church. I mean, beside the Vatican, which is like priceless, so there can't be a dollar number amount. Besides that, Mormon church,
Very
we got
rich.
everybody beat now, and there's so much money, and they do own so much real estate, like more ranch land than I think any other corporation in the US, like lots of different things. But it's like, why are these temples going in places where numbers are dwindling instead of growing? But it's the same type of thing. Like it gets the word out there, and it's almost can be like a promotional tool of what's that? Oh, okay, maybe I'll go listen to the missionaries, right? And it doesn't matter to spend 30, $50 million when you have hundreds of billions of dollars on reserves or in just one hidden in the mountain, not even including all the investments, right? So yeah, it's totally something that when you're saying that, I'm like, oh, that also sounds a little familiar.
So if you had to guess how many like full-blown mainline, what's the right word that to use for the mainline Mormon church? Is it temples? Is what do you call the churches?
The chapels, like, so
Are
there's
they called
chapels.
chapels?
So there's chapels where you go every Sunday and like for normal meetings, and then there's the temples, which you have to have a temple recommend, and you have to be, it's not going to sound right to say like the elite, but you have to like be following all the rules, and you get a temple recommend, and you have to go through like multiple interviews to be allowed into the temple, which is the main goal of every member, because that's where you make the ordinances, the saving ordinances to get to the highest level of exaltation.
Right.
So there's
Okay,
a
so
combo.
if you had to estimate how many temples there were in the entire world,
Yeah, there's 100 and
We don't
we
have
can
to
look it
estimate.
up. We don't have to estimate.
You
There's
can Google that.
yeah, there's
wait,
I think there's like
it's only that
180.
you're kidding. That's it?
The Mormon Church actually does a pretty good job with their statistics.
Yeah.
And they, at their general conferences, they have semi-annual general conferences, and that gets broadcast to the whole world. And they'll tell like, okay, this is how many temples we have, this is how many we're building, this is how many are under construction. So they're pretty transparent with those numbers.
It says it's only about 200. Well, it says
Okay.
367, but in that number, they're including 104 that have been announced, but not under
Not built.
construction.
Okay, so a little
Okay.
over 200.
So it says 202 dedicated temples. That's a lot less than I would have thought. But what if I asked the same question about you said chapel is the word?
The chapels or the meeting houses, yes.
How many Mormon chapels are there in? So just so I get a comparison, how big might a chapel be in terms of members?
Oh, one per chapel, you're probably going to end up with what, like 500 to 800?
Because
Oh my God, that much? That's huge.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of people in each of
There's
them.
a lot of people, because that one building isn't just for one congregation. So they have them in time blocks. So you'll like one meeting house, you'll have a different ward of a couple hundred people at 9 a.m., 11 a.m., 1 p.m. And sometimes if it's like a really, like if you're in Utah and there's a lot of people in a geographical area, they'll do like 8:30, 10:30, and they'll add an extra block, what they call a block in. So,
Wow.
I mean, the Mormon church is like 17.5 million members.
Yeah, a lot of members.
So, like,
So-
I like to say that the Mormon church has lost more money in its couch cushions than Scientology has ever had in its entire existence. So,
That would
I mean,
be safe to say.
I remember seeing a news article like someone got in trouble because there was like one bank account that got lost, had like $85 billion in it or something.
The SEC, yeah. Well, they were hiding like I think it was even less than that. It was like they had to keep less than 100 million or something in each. There was like it was in the millions that you couldn't have in an account without reporting it to the SEC. So they had like multiple bank accounts that they were trying to like split it up into, so they didn't have to report it, and they got in trouble for that. But when they get fined, like I think they got fined like $5 or $10 million of a fine. That's like literally pennies.
Right.
It's nothing. That's the
Right.
change in the couch cushions.
Okay, so for me, comparing a Mormon temple to a Scientology org would be an incorrect comparison because even your chapels are exponentially larger than any Scientology organization. So
Okay.
even in cases like a large state like Pennsylvania, where
Mhm.
there's only one org in the entire state, and actually not even that, if you take Pennsylvania and New Jersey, two top 10 biggest states in the country, in Pennsylvania and New Jersey together, there's only one Scientology organization. And that Scientology organization would be lucky if between public and staff, it has 100 members.
Oh, wow.
And so that's a Scientology org. That's a mainline major Scientology org, of which in the world, there's only 137.
Okay.
And
Wow.
each one of those orgs would be lucky to have a combined total of 100 members, including staff and public.
Okay. So what's their growth rate? Like are they continuing to grow? Are they losing more members than what they're gaining?
They are rapidly shrinking.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
And David Miscavige manages to convince Scientologists, despite everything they can see with their own two eyes in front of their own face, that Scientology is the fastest growing religious movement on earth.
Wow.
Yeah. And so the reason I asked about the membership numbers here
Yeah.
is because, or the number of organizations, was to try to get a comparison. But if we look, it says here that there is likely between 15,000 and 20,000 conservatively chapels, Mormon chapels worldwide. Does that sound
yeah.
realistic?
Oh, yeah, 100%. I mean,
Yeah.
in every state, I mean, I think the furthest, like when you hear people be like, oh my gosh, I have to travel so far to go to church. In the US, that's a maximum of an hour. Like if someone lives really rurally, maybe they have to go an hour. And beyond that, most chapels in any big city, I mean, we live in Las Vegas and you don't have to drive more than 5
everywhere.
minutes before getting to one. So, and in Utah, it's on almost every corner.
And would you guys say that all 50 states have at least one Mormon chapel?
Oh,
Yes.
yeah. Every
yes.
every US state
Has multiple.
has, I would say,
Yeah.
easily. I don't know if the smallest state would have less than 10.
Right. Whereas
Like
half of the states do not have a single Scientology organization.
Yeah.
Okay.
Much
Interesting.
smaller. Well, and just the amount of people that are considered Scientologists alone, that's just a very small number. I mean, we're talking a few thousand versus millions in the
Yeah.
mainstream. The Scientology seems to be more similar to the fundamentalist groups that we talk about within the Mormon breakoff groups.
Like there's currently about 40,000 polygamists in Utah and the surrounding states.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's fundamentalist Mormonism, right? And that's in a lot of different groups, but I think that'd probably, like you said, be a closer comparison.
Right.
That's
even though it's
incredible.
geographically more in one area.
So even in Florida, which is what, maybe in the top 5 biggest states in the US?
Yeah.
There's an org in Tampa, Orlando, Miami. That's it.
Okay.
There's
Okay.
not even Jacksonville, not even Tallahassee.
Okay.
And even in Miami and Orlando, which honestly, huge populations, tourist destinations, these organizations have like 5 staff members.
Wow.
Okay.
So do you foresee it being a possibility that Scientology just ends up dying out at some point if they're not going to be able to maintain? Is there a lot of I guess this is a separate question, but if you don't mind answering both at the same time.
Sure.
Is there a lot of push to have a lot of children to be able to have like children born into the organization?
There is not a push like that, and that is one of the reasons Scientology is shrinking. Because unlike the world's mainstream religions, where sure you have tithing and you have this and that, Scientology is so expensive. People oftentimes spend more than 100% of their income on Scientology. It's incredibly expensive to do Scientology. There's no incentive as a Scientologist to have 10 kids. There's no incentive. If you were a Scientology family and you had 10 kids, the only way your kids would ever be able to do Scientology, just due to the financial commitment, would be for you to send them off to work full-time for the organization, so that when you work full-time for the organization, technically all the Scientology you do is free. But who wants to have 10 kids just to give them away and send them away? Like that defeats the entire reason to have a big family.
Big family.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so
exactly.
Scientology families are small.
Okay.
That makes sense, because a lot of these churches that are growing rapidly, it's because they're having so many kids and they're just being raised in the church. And what easier way to convince someone that one belief is the one and only truth, other than, raising them in it, right? I mean, you can probably speak for this too, Aaron, but I was 110% convinced that the FLDS church was the only truth on this earth, because that's what my parents told me. Of course, I'm going to believe my parents, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. And even though there's certain pieces of Scientology that I was comfortable not believing, especially since there was no claim of divinity. It's not like, oh my God, if I disagree with this, you're disagreeing with God. It was really just L. Ron Hubbard. But so there were parts of Scientology I was totally comfortable being like, well, that's kind of bullshit. I'm not going to believe that. I believed in the big pieces. I believed in the prison planet story. I believed in this concept of full operating thetan, which is basically you do enough Scientology, you become a god. I believed in the big pieces, and it's like, and that's just because it's what I was spoon fed since I was a child. I mean, I'm sure you guys must have experienced the same thing of speaking to former members of high control groups. It really seems like there is nothing you cannot convince an awful lot of people to believe, especially if you get them young.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No,
unfortunately,
getting people young. And that's why I asked about the family, because I think, and this might have been a year or two ago, again, the mainstream LDS church comes out with their reports and they'll tell you this is how many members were baptized. It'll also say how many members were baptized as children, at 8 years old, right? Versus converts. And I think last time I looked at one of the numbers, a year or two ago, in 1 year, I think there was 130,000 8-year-olds baptized.
Wow.
In 1 year, right? So obviously having family be such a big tenet of the faith, and that being a big thing, that's growing the church at an enormous rate to begin with, is just continuing to have children and having large families. And that's the same with the FLDS, where now they're dwindling, not just because their prophet's in prison, which is a little piece, because unfortunately they're still listening to what he says.
right.
But when he said that they had to stop having children, then
it's gone.
Like I say,
the height of the FLDS was close to 15,000, and now they're down to maybe even under 5,000. So it's gone way down because the children weren't being born into it at that rapid pace. So you mentioned, Aaron, I just want to touch on this if you don't mind. You mentioned the different levels in Scientology. And I would love to hear a little bit more about those, and as well, of course, how high up in those levels did you go?
So me personally, I did effectively none of them.
Oh,
okay.
Which is not uncommon for people that work full-time for Scientology.
Wait, so you worked full-time, you signed the contract, and you were in the Sea Org, but you didn't do the levels?
That's very, very common for Sea Org members.
Interesting. Tell me more.
So, there's even a concept in Scientology of or a phrase that when you're one of the full-time workers, you're on the business side of the e-meter. Now, we haven't talked about the e-meter. It's their electrical device that they use in their auditing sessions. And when you're doing a professional auditing session, you're using this e-meter. I actually have one in my living room.
Okay. Can we see it?
Yeah, you want me to go grab it real quick?
Oh, I totally do. I want to see.
Okay. All right, I'll be right back. Hold on.